Hi, I'm Darryn Farrugia and welcome. What I'm going to talk about with you today is getting your sound together. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the sound of your drums, what wood they're made out of, what sort of heads you use, how you tune them, how expensive your drums are, or how cheap your drums are, how old or how new your drums are. It's actually about the sound that you produce from the instrument. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people say things like, if you had one drum set in a room and you had 5 drummers play that drum set, it will sound different 5 different ways. And that is very true, because all of us drummers, we have a different way of extracting the sound from the instrument. Some people get a really nice sound, some people maybe not so much. When I'm talking to my students, I'm always at them about the sound that they get. Is their sound consistent? Is the balance of the drum set or the balance of the voices within that drum set correct for the style of music that you're playing? So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this today. I should also say that to start off with, if you practice only on an electronic drum kit, then this is not going to apply to you, because the sounds that you get from an electronic drum kit are already very produced and already sound good. So you're not really learning how to extract the sound from the drum set. So if you can manage it, and usually people practice on electronic kits because of noise problems or noise restrictions. So if you can get your drum set into a studio environment, like a practice space or a rehearsal studio, if you can do that once a week, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The incredible disparity between the sound that you get in your headphones if you're playing on electronic drums compared to the sound of your acoustic kit could be quite discouraging. One of the first things I'm going to talk about is the sound that you get from the snare drum. And I'm going to demonstrate this by just playing a simple rock beat. Now, if I have a student learning a rock beat out of a book and they play this, well, are they playing correctly? Are they playing that rock beat the way it should be played? Well, on paper, they're playing exactly what should be played. Eighth notes on the hi-hat, snare drum on 2 and 4, kick drum on 1 and 3. Does it sound like a rock beat? It kind of sounds like a rock beat. But does it sound like the rock beat that someone like Kenny Aronoff would play, or that JR would play, or any great drummer would play? Does it sound like a rock drummer or a seasoned drummer playing a rock beat? I would say it doesn't. So what's the difference? The difference is in the way that those drummers balance the voices and also the way they get a sound from the instrument. So let's look at the snare drum. If I was playing that rock beat, the first thing I would do, and the first thing I tell students, is to consider playing the backbeat as a rim shot. Now, you can go as far back as listening to early Beatles recordings right through to hear that Ringo is playing a rim shot for his backbeat. What we want to do is get that cracking snare drum sound. Again, it's not necessarily a tuning thing more than it is in the way that you play it. So here's the sound I'm talking about. Now, there's a little bit of inconsistency in that. I can hear it. I'm sure you can too. So that's something that I work on. I just warm up, practicing getting those rim shots as consistent sounding as possible. Getting back to that rock beat, having that snare drum popping out is really what we want. Now, in terms of balance, we want to make sure that the kick and the snare drum part is the most prominent part of the rock groove, and less so with the hi-hat. Now, when I played that for you before, I was sort of playing the hi-hat quite loud, and it sounded top heavy. It made the groove sound top heavy. So you've got to make sure that the kick drum is, solid and weighty down the bottom and not too heavy in the top end by bashing the hi-hat. So let me play that same rock beat again. I'm going to make those adjustments. Quieter hi-hats, rim shot on the snare drum, bass drum, nice and strong. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to me that sounds more like, you know, a studio drummer playing a basic rock beat. I would suggest that that's a good place to start. Beyond that point, if you need to raise the volume of everything together. So be aware that if you want to get louder at this, then everything comes up evenly. You don't just want the right hand to come up louder and bashing away at the hi-hats, because that is not a good sound. I should also say that in my studio where I am here, I've got my drums mic'd up because I do a lot of remote recording sessions for people. But today I've taken my hi-hat mic away, so I have no hi-hat mic. And I did that deliberately because I didn't want to have that individual volume control for that particular voice of the drum set. So internal balance is an important thing. At the start of this video, you heard me playing a 16th note groove, which I absolutely love. And so when I play 16th note grooves, I'm replicating the sound of certain songs played by certain drummers that I really love. Now the drummers that I'm talking about here would be people like Steve Gadd, Jeff Porcaro, Carlos Vega, J.R. Robinson, John J.R. Robinson. Now, if you listen to those recordings that they play on, the hi-hats are so back in the mix, but it's also an example of the drummers actually just playing their hi-hats very lightly. So go and check out those drummers on YouTube. Try and have a listen to their volume. Are they bashing the hell out of the hi-hats? No, they're not. They really learn to control the hi-hats. So when I play a 16th note groove, I usually play it like this. 1, 2, 3. So the point that I'm trying to make is that I want the bass drum and snare drum voices to be strong, the hi-hats are a little back in the mix. In terms of the volume balance of those three voices, kick, snare, hats, that's kind of how I think about it. Now, we also play fills, which means we have to hit the toms. There is nothing worse than hearing a tom fill sound like this. So I think it's also important to think about how the drums project and how the toms fit into the balance of the kit. I really like to punch the toms so that they really poke out of the mix. Again, there's nothing worse than the anti-climax that's experienced when you go to play a fill or where you hear a fill and the toms don't pop out enough. And these are all adjustments that I make internally. I don't want to have to rely on a recording engineer, or myself for that matter, as a recording engineer to make those adjustments in the mix, you know, post-production. I like to take care of all of that stuff while I'm playing. So have a think about that. Think about the toms poking out. When you play a fill, you want those toms to poke out and sound strong, clean, round, etc. Another aspect is the ride cymbal. When I play the ride cymbal, you know, again, I'm not bashing away at it depending on what I'm playing, but certainly I try to think about the balance between the ride cymbal volume and the hi-hat. For example, so I'm going to play a groove, I'm going to play quarter notes on the ride cymbal, the hi-hat's going to play all the upbeats, so I want to get those two voices to balance. So I don't want the ride cymbal to be too loud so it kind of obliterates the hi-hat and we lose the effect of the hi-hat playing the upbeats. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3. You get the idea. So again, I'm thinking about the balance of these two voices. If I'm playing a groove where I've got the right hand on the ride cymbal and my left hand is on the hi-hat, then again, I'm thinking of the balance between those two voices. So here's a neat exercise. Take a paradiddle and just practice it between the ride cymbal and hi-hat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, what you're going for is an even volume between those two voices so that you can hear this stuff on the hi-hat. It's not being obliterated by the volume of the ride cymbal. When I'm playing the bell of the ride cymbal, I'm not, hitting that too hard. I'm just trying to get a good clean sound. 1, 2, 3. Then the other thing I think about is the crashes. When you play a fill, you usually hit a crash cymbal afterwards. And I'm not going to drop any names here, but two musicians I know got to experience Steve Gadd in a recording session, and they noticed an interesting thing when Steve Gadd plays a crash and he hits the bass drum with the crash, that bass drum note with the crash is actually louder than all of the bass drum notes that he would play within the groove. And this is a really good exercise and something that's going to add real punch and dynamics and impact to the end of your fills. So, if I'll play a groove and then I'll throw a fill in, and what I'm going to do here is deliberately try to hit my bass drum louder when I hit the crash. Let's see if this makes a difference, and I hope you can hear the difference. 1, 2, 3. So that's something you can do to give your fills a little bit more impact. So many years ago, I got to have a chat with a really great recording engineer here in Melbourne. His name is Ernie Rose. Ernie's, quite a legend in the recording scene here and has recorded so many albums and so many incredible artists, including Paul McCartney. Wow. He said to me once that you should be able to record the drums with one microphone, and I totally agree with him. With the right microphone placement, you should be able to get all of the voices of the drum set, but most importantly is that the drummer should produce a sound that is balanced so that you don't need all of those drums individually mic'd in order to balance the drums. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how I worked on my sound and my balance, my internal balance. Early in the 1990s, I used to practice in a rehearsal studio. I had a whole rehearsal studio to myself. I used to set up a PZM microphone over the opposite side of the room, kind of the audience perspective, and I would play and record myself, and then I would listen back to those recordings and make an assessment on what I thought was a balanced sound, and ask myself questions like, is the hi-hat too loud? Are the toms not loud enough? And I would constantly make these adjustments until I heard a sound that I liked, until I had an internal balance that I thought was a good sound. So from that point, I just kept practicing at that. Now remember that this is dependent upon the style of music that you're playing. If you're playing in a punk band, then the internal balance might be a little different. And for example, if you're playing jazz, then the emphasis is put on different limbs. For example, jazz is really led by the ride cymbal. If you're feathering and playing quiet quarter notes on the bass drum, then that is a consideration that you have to make, technically speaking, so that you are able to play very quiet quarter notes on the bass drum. So what I'm going to suggest is that you record yourself with one microphone, and if you can get the microphone as far from you as you can, i.e. how it would sound if someone was sitting in front of the drum set. Have a think about the sound that you're getting. Have a think about the way the drums are projecting. And then have a think about the sound that you get when you're playing with other instrumentalists. For example, you might be playing in a small group, or you might be playing in a trio, or it might be an electric trio. Again, those things are important to consider, because you can't just be bashing away at something if you're playing, you know, sort of a funky R&B thing and you're in a room that's doesn't have the best acoustics. So you constantly have to make those adjustments, especially if you're not mic'd up. But this is all food for thought, and I wanted to share this with you because I think it's really important. So as I say to my students, take responsibility for your sound. Anyway, if you like this video, hit the like button. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when I've uploaded a video, which is every week. So until next week, have a great week, and I'll see you all soon. Happy practicing. Bye. We'll get this together. Oh God, I'm so sweaty.